Welcome to the Deep Dive. Forget your usual Tuesday, because today we're plunging headfirst into the gloriously unpredictable world of the Eurovision Song Contest. Think international rivalries, show-stopping performances, and probably more key changes than you can shake a glitter cannon at.
Oh, absolutely. For, nearly 70 years now, this annual international song competition, it was born from a desire for transnational television, actually, and inspired by Italy's Sanremo Music Festival. It's really captivated audiences.
Exactly. And to help us navigate this, dazzling phenomenon, we've got our main source, the Wikipedia page on the Eurovision Song Contest. Our mission for this deep dive: to unearth the most surprising, the most fascinating nuggets from its history, its constantly changing format, and, its undeniable cultural impact. Okay, so Eurovision. Where did this wonderfully weird and wonderful spectacle actually, spring from?
Well, the seeds of Eurovision were really sown with the formation of the European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, way back in 1950. But the specific idea for a song contest came from Sergio Pugliese, who was a manager at the Italian broadcaster RAI.
Italy, yeah, a nation synonymous with music. That kind of figures, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it wasn't just like a completely original idea, was it? He had something else in mind.
Precisely. Pugliese looked straight at the already successful Sanremo Music Festival, which had been running since 1951, and he basically envisioned how that format could be, amplified onto an international stage, bringing nations together through song.
Right, so 1956, the very first contest. Can you paint us a picture? What was that like?
Lugano, Switzerland. That was the first host city. Though, interestingly, it wasn't actually called Eurovision yet. It was the European Grand Prix. 7 countries took part, and here's a really fascinating detail. Each country submitted 2 songs.
2 songs, wow.
Yeah, just for that first year. Never happened again.
That's a level of commitment you don't really see now. And who came out on top that first time?
The honor went to Lasasha, representing the home nation, Switzerland, with her song Refrain. But what's truly striking, I think, is how different that first contest was. The voting. Totally behind closed doors.
So scoreboard.
Nope. Only the winner was announced publicly. Imagine that no dramatic point reveals keeping us all on the edge of our seats.
Wow, no tense point exchanges. That's almost a completely different competition compared to the Eurovision we know today, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, beyond just being a song contest, what were the sort of underlying goals? Why bring these nations together like this?
Well, there were several key motivations, really. Firstly, it was a pretty ambitious test of, the relatively new technology of transnational live television, coordinating broadcasts across multiple borders back then. That was a huge technical challenge. Secondly, it was a powerful way to promote the burgeoning medium of television itself. And crucially, it aimed to foster the creation and performance of original musical works, a real post-war thing, promoting unity and creativity.
A truly forward-thinking initiative for its time. And the name Eurovision itself, it's got such a ring to it. How did that become the established title?
That's interesting, actually. The term Eurovision was around before the contest. A British journalist, George Campy, coined it back in '51. He used it to describe a BBC program being relayed by Dutch TV.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the EBU then used the Eurovision transmission network for various international broadcasts in the early '50s. The name already had some recognition. So while there were some early variations and a brief rebranding as Eurosong in 1996, Eurovision Song Contest just sort of gradually became the standard. It was officially adopted in 2004. It tapped into that idea of a shared European broadcast space.
And it's not just the name that's evolved. The whole visual identity has too, hasn't it? From unique designs each year to something more consistent now.
Exactly. In the beginning, each host broadcaster created a totally unique logo for their edition. It reflected their national identity or maybe the theme of that year's contest. But to build a stronger, more recognizable global brand, they introduced a generic Eurovision logo in 2004. That's the one you see now, the stylized Eurovision script with the heart.
Right, the heart.
Yeah, though interestingly, the host country still designs a unique theme artwork each year, and they often get creative incorporating their national flag into that central Eurovision heart.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a blend of consistent branding and, national flair.
Okay, so we've got the origins, the naming, the look. Fast forward to today. What does the modern Eurovision format actually look like for someone, say, tuning in for the first time? What's the journey from a song being chosen nationally to that winner's reprise?
All right. So today, it's this spectacular multi-day event. It's broadcast live via the huge Eurovision and Euro radio networks. They're really the backbone, allowing this seamless transmission across so many countries. Since 2008, the formats included two semifinals, usually Tuesday and Thursday, building up the anticipation for the grand final on Saturday.
And not every participating country has to fight it out in the semis, right? There's the famous Big Five who get sort of free pass to the final.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
That's right. France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the United Kingdom, the Big Five, they automatically qualify for the final, along with the host country of that year.
Why is that?
It's primarily because their broadcasters make the largest financial contributions to the EBU. It helps ensure the financial stability of the whole event. Now, this guarantees their spot in the final, but it also, sparks quite a bit of debate among fans about fairness and the competitive balance.
I bet.
Yeah, so all the other participating countries have to compete in one of the two semifinals, and then the top 10 from each semi go through to the final on Saturday.
So a pretty demanding week for most of the contenders. And how do the individual countries actually decide who gets to represent them on this massive stage? Is it the same everywhere?
Oh no, the selection process is entirely up to each participating national broadcaster. Some countries put on these really elaborate, televised national finals, think huge productions, where the public, and often a jury, vote for their favorite song and artist.
Like Melodifestivalen in Sweden.
Exactly like Melodifestivalen. That's a perfect example. It's often bigger than Eurovision itself in Sweden viewership-wise. Then others opt for an internal selection, where basically a committee inside the broadcaster just picks the entry. And some use a kind of hybrid approach. It really highlights the diverse ways nations tackle this.
Okay, then come the live shows themselves, the semis and the final. What can viewers expect when they tune in?
Each show usually kicks off with a really visually stunning opening performance. It sets the tone, often reflects the theme chosen by the host country. Since 2013, the final has also featured a flag parade.
Ah, yes, the flag parade.
Yeah, it's this vibrant procession where all the competing artists enter the arena waving their national flags. It creates this powerful visual, kind of reminiscent of the Olympic Games, And throughout the evening, you'll have one or more presenters, usually fluent in both English and French. Those are the EBU's official languages, guiding the audience, doing interviews in the green room, and importantly, overseeing the pretty complex voting procedures.
And then the core of it, the performances. I assume these are all brand new songs written just for Eurovision.
Yes, absolutely. Each participating country submits an original song. It has to stick to specific rules, like a maximum length of 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay.
Yep, and crucially, these songs can't have been commercially released before September 1st of the year before the contest. That ensures a level playing field and, the premiere of new music. And, of course, all entries have to feature vocals and lyrics. You can't have purely instrumental pieces.
Got it. So after all the musical offerings, the tension really starts to build with the voting. How does that work in the modern contest? It seems complicated.
It can seem that way. Once all the songs have been performed, the voting lines open up. Viewers in participating countries can vote for their favorite entries, though, importantly, you cannot vote for your own country.
Right.
You can usually vote via phone, SMS, or the official Eurovision app. This public vote, the televote, accounts for 50% of the final score.
And the other crucial 50%, that comes from the professional juries, right?
Exactly. Each participating country also puts together a jury of music industry professionals. They also cast their votes based on the performances, typically watching a separate dress rehearsal. So during the voting window in the live show, the broadcast features an interval act, often a huge global artist or maybe a spectacular showcase of the host country's talent. Riverdance is the famous example there.
Oh, yeah.
Then comes the really anticipated part, the results reveal. In the semifinals, they announce the 10 qualifying countries in a random order to build suspense. But in the final, it's more detailed. Each country's jury spokesperson comes on screen to announce their top points 1 through 8, then 10, and the coveted 12 points, the dues points.
Dues points?
The dues points. Then, after all the jury points are in, they reveal the aggregated public vote totals for each country. Since 2019, they've done this in ascending order based on the jury rankings, which can lead to some really dramatic shifts right at the end. This combined system aims to balance, popular appeal with expert musical assessment.
That point reveal can be an absolute roller coaster. And what's the ultimate reward when a winner is finally declared, apart from bragging rights?
Well, the winning artist or group gets presented with the iconic glass microphone trophy, usually by the previous year's winner. It symbolizes the passing of the Eurovision crown. They then get to perform a celebratory reprise of their winning song, usually a moment of pure joy and often chaos. And, as tradition dictates, the honor and the challenge of hosting the following year's contest typically falls to the winning broadcaster.
So tradition plays a massive role. Now let's dig into who can actually wave their flag on the Eurovision stage. Because it's not strictly a European affair, is it?
You're absolutely right there. Eligibility is tied to active membership in the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union. And interestingly, the European Broadcasting Area, which defines who's eligible, actually extends beyond the traditional geographical borders of Europe. It includes parts of Western Asia and North Africa.
Ah, so that explains countries like Israel.
Exactly. That's why countries like Israel have been long-standing participants, and even Morocco participated once, way back. It highlights this broader definition of European in the Eurovision context.
And then there's the really unique case of Australia. How on earth did they become such a beloved fixture of Eurovision?
Australia is fascinating. They were initially invited to participate as a special one-off guest for the 60th anniversary in 2015. It was basically a nod to their incredibly long-standing and passionate Eurovision fan base down under.
Right, they broadcast it for years.
For decades. And their participation proved to be such a hit, and their enthusiasm was so infectious that they've basically been invited back every year since. They hold this unique distinction of being the only country from outside the European broadcasting area to be a regular competitor. It really underscores Eurovision's expanding global appeal.
It truly speaks to the contest's reach. What's the maximum number of countries we've ever seen competing in a single year? Must be quite crowded.
The record currently stands at 44 participating countries. That happened in 2008, 2011, and again in 2018. It's a real testament to the continued interest in the competition. And in total, a remarkable 52 different countries have graced the Eurovision stage at least once. That's a truly diverse range of musical and cultural expressions.
52? That's quite the global gathering. And I assume each of these nations has a financial stake in the event. It can't be cheap to put on.
No, it certainly isn't. Each participating broadcaster contributes a fee to the EBU. The exact amount is worked out based on a combination of factors, things like the country size and its potential television viewership. It's essentially a collective investment in putting on this massive production each year.
Okay, so a country wins, takes home the Crystal Microphone trophy. What happens next in terms of hosting? It sounds like an immense undertaking with pretty significant implications.
It is indeed a significant undertaking, yeah. The winning broadcaster traditionally gets the first option and usually the responsibility of hosting the following year's event. There have been a few instances since 1958 where this didn't happen, maybe due to financial or political reasons, but it's the strong tradition.
And it's seen as a big opportunity.
Oh, definitely. Hosting is viewed as a prime opportunity to showcase the host country and the specific city to a huge global audience. It can be a real boost for tourism, generate economic benefits, but the costs involved are substantial.
I've definitely heard whispers, maybe just fan theories, that some countries might strategically aim not to win sometimes, just to avoid those hefty hosting costs. Is there any truth to that, do you think, or is it more of an urban legend?
That's a popular theory among fans, isn't it? The idea of sending in a deliberately lackluster performance to dodge the financial burden of hosting certainly makes for a fun narrative. But honestly, there's no real concrete evidence to suggest this is a widespread or deliberate strategy. National pride and, the genuine desire to win usually seem to be the main driving forces. It makes for good gossip, though.
It definitely adds to the lore. So for a city to actually host, it needs more than just enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
What are the key criteria the EBU looks for?
Absolutely. The host broadcaster selects a city that has to meet a pretty stringent set of requirements laid down by the EBU. The main venue, the arena, must have a capacity for at least 10,000 spectators.
Wow, 10,000 minimum.
Yeah, and it also needs to house a press center capable of accommodating something like 1,500 journalists from all over the world. Plus, the city needs to be easily accessible, ideally close to an international airport, and crucially, possess enough hotel capacity to house the thousands of delegates, press, and fans who descend on the host city for Eurovision week.
From, intimate theaters in the early days to sprawling stadiums more recently, the venues have certainly varied dramatically over the years, haven't they?
They really have, yeah. We've seen everything from smaller indoor arenas to absolutely massive outdoor or covered stadiums. The largest venue ever used was Parken Stadium in Copenhagen, which welcomed nearly 38,000 people back in 2001.
38,000.
Yeah. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have Mill Street in Ireland. Tiny town, population around 1,500 at the time, famously hosted the contest in 1993. It just goes to show that a grand scale isn't always necessary for a truly memorable Eurovision.
Mill Street hosting Eurovision, that's genuinely remarkable. Highlights that community spirit sometimes involved. And are these typically existing venues that get repurposed for Eurovision week? Or do cities build new ones?
Almost always existing venues. Unlike, say, the Olympics or the World Cup, Eurovision doesn't usually lead to the construction of entirely new, purpose-built stadiums just for the event. The main exception that comes to mind was in 2012 when Baku, Azerbaijan, hosted. They built the Baku Crystal Hall specifically after their victory the previous year, but that's quite rare. It shows the potential long-term investment a win can inspire, though.
Interesting. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts, the rules that govern this whole spectacle. Who actually sets these rules, and how have they shifted and changed over the decades? Because they have changed, haven't they?
Oh, constantly. The rulebook is established annually. It's a collaborative effort between the EBU and the host broadcaster, but they also consult with all the other participating broadcasters. Overseeing this whole process is the executive supervisor appointed by the EBU, that's currently Martin Osterdahl, and also the reference group.
A reference group.
Yeah, it's a body representing all the participating broadcasters. They help develop and refine the rules in the format year on year. The rulebook itself is incredibly comprehensive. It covers everything from song and artist eligibility to the really intricate details of the voting system.
Okay, so song length, release dates, lyrical content.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the key rules that dictate the songs themselves? We mentioned the 3-minute limit.
Yeah, the 3-minute maximum is a big one. Been around for ages, mainly to keep the broadcast manageable. Then there's the release date rule. Songs can't have been commercially released before September 1st of the year before the contest. That keeps it fresh. And fundamentally, every entry has to include live vocals and lyrics. You can't have purely instrumental tracks or, say, a cappella piece competing.
And the language rules. They've been a bit of a roller coaster over the years, haven't they? From no restrictions to strict native language requirements and then back again.
Absolutely. A real pendulum swing. Initially, there were no language rules. Artists could sing in whatever language they wanted. But then after Sweden sent an entry in English in 1965, a rule came in for 66 requiring songs to be in an official language of the participating country.
Okay.
That rule was then abolished in 1973, leading to ABBA winning in English in 74, only be brought back again for most countries in 1977. Finally, ahead of the 1999 contest, that language restriction was completely removed for good. So since then, artists have had the freedom to perform in any language they desire, including, constructed languages or regional dialects. It adds to the rich linguistic mix of Eurovision. These changes definitely influence the types of songs and maybe the contest's broader appeal over time.
What about the performers themselves? Are there rules about solo artists versus groups, or how many people can actually be on stage?
In the early days, yeah, it was mainly solo artists. Duos were allowed from 1957, and then groups could compete from 1971 onwards. Currently, the maximum number of performers allowed on stage for any single entry is 6.
6 people max.
6 people max. And perhaps obviously for safety and ethical reasons, no live animals are permitted on stage. And regarding age, since 1990, all contestants have to be at least 16 years old on the day of the live final. That put an end to very young winners like Sandra Kim, who won for Belgium when she was only 13.
Right. No more child prodigies taking the Eurovision crown. And the orchestra for decades, that was such an integral part of the Eurovision sound, wasn't it? What's its status now? Because you don't see it anymore.
You don't. The orchestra was absolutely a defining feature of Eurovision, right, from 56 up until 1998. Interestingly, pre-recorded backing tracks were first allowed way back in 1973, although any pre-recorded instrumentals had to be sort of visibly mimed on stage back then.
Right, okay.
By 1999, the orchestra became optional for the host broadcaster. Israel hosted that year, and they decided not to include one. So that was the first contest where every single entry relied entirely on backing tracks. And today, yeah, all instrumental music is pre-recorded. However, live vocals remain absolutely mandatory. Though, since 2021, backing vocals can optionally be pre-recorded, which offers a bit more flexibility for the performers and maybe allows for more complex vocal arrangements on the track.
So the absence of the live orchestra is a really significant change. It must have influenced the whole sound of the contest.
Oh, hugely. It's arguably changed the sonic landscape quite dramatically.
The order in which the songs are performed, that's not just random anymore, is it? I hear there's deliberate strategy behind the running order now.
That's correct. Since 2013, the producers of the contest, not a random draw, have been responsible for determining the running order for both the semifinals and the grand final.
Why did they change that?
Well, the official reason is that this strategic decision aims to create a more engaging and varied show for the television audience, and specifically to avoid having, say, 3 ballads in a row or multiple songs with similar staging styles performed consecutively. However, the draw to decide which countries compete in which semifinals still involves an element of chance. Countries are placed into different pots based on things like geography and historical voting patterns to try and ensure a diverse mix in each semi.
Okay, that makes sense. And the voting system itself, you touched on it, but it's undergone countless revisions and tweaks throughout Eurovision's history, hasn't it? Always trying to strike that balance between the jury and the public vote.
Absolutely. It's evolved so much. From being solely jury-based in the early days to incorporating public voting, and the way points are awarded and presented has seen several big transformations. Since 2023, in the final, each participating country awards those points 1 to 8, 10, and 12, based on the combined votes of their professional jury and the public televote.
50-50 split.
50-50 split in the final, yeah. In the semifinals, however, the results are now primarily determined just by the public vote, which was a recent change. And interestingly, another recent change, since 2023, viewers in non-participating countries around the world can even cast votes online. Their votes are aggregated together and counted as one additional set of points the rest of the world vote.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it further expands the reach and influence of the public vote. Of course, the fundamental rule remains you can't vote for your own country. And if there's a tie in the final score, the song that received the higher ranking from the public vote is declared the winner.
Good to know the tiebreaker rule.
Mm.
And there are even rules covering the broadcasts themselves, ensuring the integrity and reach of the contest, I guess.
Yes, participating broadcasters are obligated to transmit the semifinal in which they are competing or voting if they're the Big Five or the host and the entirety of the grand final, live, no skipping bits.
Right.
This ensures the whole spectacle, from the opening act right through to the winner's reprise, is seen by audiences across all participating nations. And that iconic Eurovision EBU network logo ident, the one accompanied by the stirring Te Deum prelude by Charpentier, that's a familiar and unifying element at the start and end of these broadcasts.
Ah, that music.
Exactly. And remarkably, the EBU now maintains a comprehensive archive. They have recordings of but 2 editions of the contest, the very first one in 1956 and the 1964 edition from Copenhagen. Only audio exists for those, I believe. It highlights their commitment to preserving this, unique cultural history.
Only audio recordings for those earliest years. That's a fascinating glimpse into a different era of television.
Yeah.
Now, let's track Eurovision's growth. It started with just 7 countries. How does it blossom into this huge event we see today with over 40 participants sometimes?
Well, the expansion has been a pretty steady trend since those initial 7 nations, but a really significant catalyst for growth came with the profound political changes across Europe in the late 1980s and especially the early 1990s.
You mean the end of the Cold War?
Exactly. The dissolution of Yugoslavia, the end of the Cold War. These events led to the emergence of many new independent countries. Their national broadcasters then became eligible to join the EBU and, consequently, participate in Eurovision. This brought a massive wave of new cultures, new languages, and new musical styles into the contest.
That sudden surge in new participants must have created some considerable logistical challenges for the organizers, surely. How did they manage that influx?
It certainly did. As the number of broadcasters wanting to participate grew beyond what could comfortably fit into a single evening broadcast, the 1990s saw the introduction of various pre-selection rounds and even relegation systems to manage the numbers.
Relegation. Like in football.
Kind of. For instance, in 1993, there was a special pre-qualifying competition held just for some of the newer countries called Kwalifikasija's Mill Street, fighting for just a few spots in the main contest. Later, they implemented a system where countries with the poorest results over a few years were actually required to sit out the following year to make space for others. These measures were pretty controversial, but arguably necessary at the time to keep the show manageable and engaging.
And it was around this time that the automatic qualification of the Big Five became particularly significant, not just financially, but in managing those numbers too, wasn't it?
Yes, precisely. In 1999, that exemption from relegation was introduced for the largest financial contributors initially, France, Germany, Spain, and the UK, the Big Four. When Italy rejoined the competition in 2011 after a long break, they were added to this group, creating the Big Five we know today. This guaranteed their participation in the final every year, providing that financial security, but also ensuring the presence of some of the contest's biggest audiences and fan bases. And with the continued surge in interest from broadcasters across Europe and beyond, eventually the semifinals were introduced in 2004, transforming Eurovision into the multi-night extravaganza we recognize today.
It's quite a journey of evolution, isn't it? From that first, rather understated contest in 1956. Now let's turn our attention to the entries and the artists themselves. Eurovision has undeniably served as a launchpad for some truly massive global music stars, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You can't talk about Eurovision without mentioning ABA. Their iconic victory for Sweden in 1974 with Waterloo was the pivotal moment that just catapulted them to international superstardom.
Changed everything for them.
Completely. And then there's Celine Dion. Her win for Switzerland, interestingly, in 1988 marked a really significant early milestone in her incredible global career. Even earlier, you had artists like Julio Iglesias representing Spain in 1970 and Olivia Newton-John representing the UK in 1974. Both went on to achieve massive worldwide success. It just shows Eurovision's potential to elevate artists onto a global stage.
Those are some absolutely legendary names whose careers were significantly boosted by their Eurovision appearance. And it's not just about launching new artists. Established names have also been drawn to the Eurovision stage over the years. What motivates them to participate, do you think?
That's a really interesting aspect. We've seen established stars like Lulu, who'd already won, come back, Toto Cutugno, who won for Italy, Katrina and the Waves, who won for the UK after having huge hits. Even legends like Nana Mouskouri and Sir Cliff Richard competed multiple times for their countries back in the day.
Cliff Richard.
Twice. For some, I think it's a chance to represent their country with pride on this enormous international platform. For others, maybe it's an opportunity to reach a vast and diverse audience again, perhaps revitalizing their career or trying out a different musical direction. It really speaks to the unique platform Eurovision offers, even for people already well known. And behind the scenes, too, many renowned songwriters have contributed, people like Serge Gainsbourg, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Pete Waterman. That adds musical credibility, too.
And some Eurovision participants have even gone on to build notable careers in fields completely outside of music, which is quite interesting.
Indeed. Annie M.G. Schmidt, who wrote the lyrics for the very first Dutch Eurovision entry back in '56, she went on to become this hugely celebrated and influential author of children's books in the Netherlands. And Dana, who won for Ireland in 1970, she later transitioned into politics, served as a member of the European Parliament, and even ran for president of Ireland. Nana Mouskouri also became a Greek MEP and a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. And Ruslana, Ukraine's winner from 2004, has been really actively involved in politics and social activism in her home country. It shows the diverse paths Eurovision alumni can take.
It's fascinating to see the varied trajectories. And some of the songs themselves, they've achieved enduring popularity and success far beyond just the contest night, haven't they? What makes a Eurovision song really resonate globally?
Oh, definitely. Many Eurovision songs have just transcended the competition to become genuine international hits. You think of Brotherhood of Man's Save Your Kisses for Me, Domenico Modugno's Nel blu dipinto di blu, Volare, which was huge in America, Mocidades Aires Tu, Gina G's Ooh Ah, just a little bit, which was massive in the 90s club scene, Lorene's Euphoria, Duncan Lawrence's Arcade, and more recently, Måneskin's Ziti Bloni.
Måneskin, yeah.
They all achieved significant commercial success and cultural impact worldwide. Often, these songs just possess this kind of universal appeal. Maybe it's a super catchy melody, powerful emotional resonance, or sometimes innovative staging that just captures everyone's imagination. And then you have the rare few who've won multiple times. Johnny Logan for Ireland won twice as a performer and once as a songwriter.
The king of Eurovision.
Pretty much. And Loreen for Sweden, who also holds the distinction of being a two-time winner as a performer, the only woman to do so. Their continued success really underscores the lasting impact a Eurovision win can have.
Ireland and Sweden currently share the record for the most Eurovision victories, don't they? 7 each. That's quite a testament to their consistent success. What might account for that sustained track record?
That's a great question, and there's probably a combination of factors. Both countries have traditionally had very strong national selection processes, especially Sweden with Melodifestivalen. They invest heavily in finding the right song and artist. There also seems to be this deep cultural appreciation for the contest within both nations, which leads to strong public engagement and maybe a better inherent understanding of what might resonate with the broader European audience. Plus, they just have a history of producing really talented artists and genuinely memorable songs that have managed to strike that chord with both the juries and the public over the years.
And what about those moments when a first-time winner finally breaks through, or a country that's been participating for decades finally reaches the top spot? Those must be particularly memorable moments in the contest's history.
Oh, absolutely. Serbia holds this really unique distinction of being the only country to have won on its very first appearance as an independent nation back in 2007 with Marija Ervefović.
Incredible debut.
Right. Ukraine and Latvia also had relatively swift success, winning on just their second and third attempts respectively. But then, in stark contrast, you have Portugal. They hold the record for the longest wait for a first victory. They finally achieved that milestone in 2017 with Salvador Sobral after an incredible 53 years of participation.
53 years, wow.
Yeah, those moments of triumph after decades of trying, they often resonate really deeply with fans and highlight the diverse journeys of all the participating nations.
Eurovision is truly a treasure trove of fascinating stats and compelling stories. Now, let's shift focus slightly to the interval acts, often a really much anticipated part of the show that can sometimes, well, almost eclipse the competition itself.
Indeed. The interval act is a crucial part of the Eurovision broadcast. It provides entertainment during that nail-biting voting period, but it also often serves as this spectacular showcase of the host country's culture, its history, its artistic talent, and perhaps the most famous example, the one everyone points to, is Riverdance.
Riverdance.
It premiered as the interval act at the 1994 contest hosted in Dublin, Ireland, and it just exploded from there, went on to become this global Irish dancing phenomenon in its own right. Its success really demonstrates the incredible reach and potential impact of that Eurovision interval slot.
Riverdance launching from Eurovision, that's an amazing piece of Eurovision history. Who else has graced the stage during those coveted interval slots over the years?
Oh, over the years, we've been treated to performances by a really diverse array of huge international names. You've had Cirque du Soleil, Madonna, Justin Timberlake, Aqua, the cello rock band Apocalyptica. Even the controversial Russian duo TATU performed once.
Wow, big names.
Yeah, and there have also been memorable guest appearances by actors, athletes, even astronauts popping up in video links. Sometimes the interval acts are used more seriously to address or reflect on significant global events. We've seen tributes or awareness performances related to things like the Balkan War, the European migrant crisis, and more recently, powerful performances linked to the invasion of Ukraine. It underscores Eurovision's connection to broader social and political realities, and let's not forget the lighter side. There are often humorous and self-aware acts, like the brilliant Love, Love, Peace, Peace performance in Stockholm 2016, which playfully poked fun at all the recurring tropes and cliches of the contest itself.
Oh, Love, Love, Peace, Peace was fantastic. A very memorable and humorous nod to Eurovision history. But the contest hasn't always been just smooth sailing and glitter, has it? It's faced its fair share of criticisms and controversies over the years.
No, it certainly hasn't. Eurovision has often been the target of criticism regarding its musical style. Some detractors label it as formulaic or overly reliant on, elaborate staging, predictable key changes, maybe cheesy lyrics.
The classic criticisms.
Exactly. However, you have millions of fans who passionately defend its unique camp appeal and the sheer diversity of musical genres and artistic expressions that actually find a platform on the Eurovision stage. But beyond musical critiques, yes, the contest has also been embroiled in numerous political controversies. These often reflect the complex, sometimes tense, geopolitical landscape of Europe and its neighbors. Particularly notable have been ongoing issues related to the relationships between countries like Armenia and Azerbaijan, Russia and Ukraine, controversies around Belarus's participation or disqualification, and recurring discussions surrounding Israel's participation. These really highlight the unavoidable intersection of culture and politics within the Eurovision sphere.
And the voting patterns. They frequently come under scrutiny, haven't they? With the term bloc voting often being thrown around to describe perceived political or geographical alliances influencing the results. How significant is this phenomenon, really, and what have they tried to do about it?
The perception of political and geographical voting, or bloc voting, has been a persistent topic of discussion among fans and commentators for, well, decades, really. Statistical analyses have suggested that countries often do tend to award higher points to their neighbors or to countries with which they share cultural, linguistic, or strong historical ties, including diaspora communities.
So it does happen.
Well, while some argue this might simply reflect genuinely shared musical tastes or cultural understanding within regions, others definitely view it as evidence of strategic political maneuvering or just neighborly loyalty. The EBU has tried to address this. The introduction of the two semifinals back in 2004, which diversified the voting pool in the final, and especially the reintroduction of professional juries to provide that 50% counterweight to the public vote, were partly implemented as measures to try and reduce the impact of perceived bloc voting and ensure a more balanced outcome. But the debate about how much these factors still influence the results, that definitely continues every year.
One area where Eurovision seems to have had a particularly significant and evolving impact, though, is in terms of LGBTQ plus visibility and representation on a massive global stage.
Indeed, that's very true. Eurovision has cultivated a huge and incredibly devoted LGBTQ plus fan base over many years, and the contest organizers, particularly more recently, have made increasing efforts towards inclusivity and representation. We've seen numerous openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender artists not only competing, but achieving really significant success. Think of Paul Oscar from Iceland back in the 90s, Dana International's win for Israel, Conchita Wurst's iconic victory for Austria, Marie Jarifovic from Serbia, Duncan Lawrence from the Netherlands, and most recently, Nemo, the first non-binary winner for Switzerland.
Right, landmark moments.
Absolutely. And many performances over the years have also incorporated LGBTQ plus themes or allusions, sometimes subtly, sometimes very openly, contributing to greater visibility and awareness on a platform watched by hundreds of millions. However, this increased visibility has also, unfortunately, sometimes led to clashes and controversies. Some countries or broadcasters have expressed objections to LGBTQ plus content, sometimes leading to boycotts. Turkey and Hungary are examples there, or even instances of censorship, like booing during performances, or broadcasts being edited in certain regions. It's this complex interplay of celebration and, well, ongoing challenges.
It truly highlights the power of a platform like Eurovision, doesn't it? Both to celebrate diversity and at the same time to become this kind of focal point for wider societal debates. Now, stepping back again to look at the bigger picture, what kind of broader cultural influence has the Eurovision Song Contest really exerted globally?
Oh, its cultural influence is undeniable, and it's really far-reaching. It commands this massive global viewership. As we've said, hundreds of millions tune in each year. That makes it one of the most watched non-sporting television events in the world.
Bigger than the Super Bowl globally, I think.
Often, yes, in terms of cumulative audience across all the countries. It's become renowned for its unique blend of musical performance, national representation, and often, yes, that flamboyant aesthetic. This has led to its widespread recognition and that sort of kitsch appeal, which is often embraced and celebrated by its fan base. It's also become a really popular subject of parody and affectionate satire in popular culture. We've even seen major films like the Will Ferrell movie Eurovision Song Contest, the Story of Fire Saga, bringing its unique charm and its quirks to an even wider audience.
Fire Saga.
And beyond that, Eurovision has fostered this huge and incredibly passionate online fandom. There are numerous fan clubs, the biggest network being OGAE, organizing events and connecting enthusiasts right across the globe. The proliferation of pre-party events in various European cities in the weeks leading up to the contest, like Eurovision in concert in Amsterdam, the London Eurovision Party, pre-party ES in Madrid that further underscores the strong sense of community it has built, and things like the fan-led #Eurovision, again, rewatch events during the pandemic showed that community spirit too.
It really has cultivated this unique and vibrant community that extends far beyond just that one week in May. And beyond the main event itself, there are other related competitions and special anniversary celebrations, aren't there? Further cementing Eurovision's place in the cultural landscape.
Yes, exactly. The EBU has organized several big special anniversary events over the years to commemorate milestones in Eurovision history. There was Songs of Europe back in 1981, the big congratulations, 50 years of the Eurovision Song Contest show in 2005, where viewers voted for the best song ever.
ABBA won that, didn't they?
Waterloo won, yes. Then there was Eurovision's Greatest Hits in 2015, and also the unique Europe Shine a Light broadcast in 2020, which replaced the canceled contest that year due to the pandemic. They also oversee a whole family of related competitions under the Eurovision Live Events banner, things like the Junior Eurovision Song Contest for younger performers, Eurovision Young Musicians, Eurovision Young Dancers, Eurovision Choir, and there was even a Eurovision Dance Contest for a couple of years. It caters to a wide range of talents and age groups. And inspired by Eurovision's enduring success, numerous other international music competitions have popped up over the years, like the Sopot Festival Intervision in Eastern Europe back in the day, the OTI Festival for Ibero-America, the Turkvision Song Contest, and even the recent, though short-lived, American Song Contest. It shows Eurovision's lasting legacy and its influence on the whole idea of international music competitions.
So Eurovision's impact truly stretches far, far beyond that spectacular week in May each year. It's a cultural touchstone, isn't it? A consistent source of entertainment, debate, and often a really fascinating reflection of the ever-evolving political and social currents of our time.
Absolutely. I mean, from its initial post-war aspirations as this kind of technological and cultural bridge between nations, right through to its current status as a truly global entertainment phenomenon, the Eurovision Song Contest is just so much more than a simple song competition. It's this rich, intricate tapestry woven with threads of history, culture, politics, technological change, and the ever-shifting landscape of popular entertainment.
It certainly is. And when you think about it, consider that powerful interplay of national identity being expressed through the universal language of music, the constant adaptation of its rules and format over nearly 7 decades now, and the really profound and multifaceted cultural footprint it has left on Europe and, increasingly, the world. So, as you reflect on this deep dive into Eurovision, what does this annual spectacle, with all its glitter and controversies, truly tell us about Europe and, indeed, the world beyond? That's maybe a thought to keep in mind until our next exploration. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a fascinating plunge into the story of Solomon,
Solomon, yeah. The fourth monarch of Israel and Judah.
succeeding his father, King David. His reign traditionally is around 970 to 931 BCE,
Right, and when you say Solomon, people immediately think, well, wisdom, incredible wealth.
and the first temple in Jerusalem. That's the big one.
Absolutely, but it's not quite that simple, is it?
No, definitely not. We're going to dig into this multifaceted figure. We'll be looking at historical accounts, mostly the Hebrew Bible.
But also religious traditions, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, and the legends. So many legends.
Exactly. And that's what makes him so compelling, the sheer range of material. But, with ancient figures.
There's always debate, scholarly debate about, well, did he really rule a huge empire? How much is history? How much is story?
Right. So for you listening, if you want to get a solid grasp without getting bogged down, that's our goal today. We'll distill the key parts of Solomon's story and the discussions around him.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. His names. Seems simple, but maybe not.
Well, he's known as Solomon, Shlomo in Hebrew, usually mean peaceful.
Peaceful, okay.
But he was also called Jedediah,
Which means?
friend of God, given by Nathan the prophet, actually. But there's more on Solomon. A 2023 textbook threw out some other possibilities,
Oh, like what?
like maybe compensation or substitute, perhaps linked to the death of David and Bathsheba's first child.
Interesting angle.
Or sticking closer to the traditional, the ruler of peace, or, and this is quite different, a connection to Shalim,
Shalim.
a Canaanite deity, the deified evening star, which could hint at, the complex religious mix in early Jerusalem.
Wow, okay, so even his name has layers. Why does that matter so much?
I think it shows how interpretations evolve, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Compensation points to family history, ruler of peace to his legacy, the deity link. That points to the religious reality on the ground back then. It wasn't monolithic.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the time frame, those dates? 970 to 931 BCE. Where do they come from? Are they solid?
They're mainly from biblical chronology. Trying to pin down exact dates that far back is always challenging.
Right.
But the timeline for the Davidic kings, including Solomon, can sometimes be lined up with records from, say, Babylon or Assyria.
External references. That helps.
It does. It helps anchor the biblical narrative in the wider ancient Near East. And Edwin Thiele's chronology, which puts his death and the kingdom splitting in 931 BCE, that's pretty widely used.
Got it. So biblical timeline, cross-reference where possible. Now his early life. Born in Jerusalem, son of David and Bathsheba. But there's a backstory there.
Oh, absolutely. He was their second child. The first son, conceived during David's affair with Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, well, that child died.
Right, the story in Samuel.
Exactly. So the biblical narrative kind of frames Solomon's birth as a sort of reconciliation, a peace offering after David's sin and repentance.
And Nathan the prophet, he was involved too.
Seems likely. Nathan had a lot of influence with David, and the text suggests he might have played a role in Solomon's upbringing.
Okay, so a complex start. Then the succession. How did he actually get the throne? Wasn't his older brother Adonijah expecting it?
Yes, Adonijah definitely made a bid for it as David was getting old and frail.
So palace politics.
Absolutely. It was Bathsheba and Nathan again. They went to David, reminded him of an alleged promise, though it's not mentioned earlier in the text that Solomon should be king.
Ah, convenient timing.
You could say that. They persuaded the dying David to publicly anoint Solomon, essentially sidelining Adonijah.
So right away, there's maneuvering. And once he's king, he doesn't just sit back, does he? He consolidates power.
Very much so. The Bible describes a pretty ruthless purge at the start of his reign, getting rid of potential rivals like Joab, David's old general.
Securing his position.
Exactly. He appointed his own loyalists to all the key posts, religious, civil, military, and he really beefed up the military, especially chariots and cavalry.
Expanding the state apparatus, too.
Yeah, more bureaucracy, and he set up these colonies, sort of trading posts, but also military bases, extending his reach.
So actively shaping the kingdom. And trade seems central to his reign, that relationship with Hiram of Tyre.
Hugely important. David had already built ties with Hiram, king of the Phoenician city of Tyre. Solomon really expanded on that.
Joint ventures.
Yeah, these big expeditions to Tarshish, probably in the Western Mediterranean, maybe Spain, and Ophir, location debated, maybe Arabia, Africa, or India.
Bringing back what, luxury goods?
Oh, yeah. Gold, silver, exotic woods like sandalwood, pearls, ivory, even apes and peacocks. The Bible really paints him as the wealthiest Israelite king ever.
A picture of real prosperity. But maybe even more than wealth, he's known for wisdom. That dream encounter with God.
That's foundational, isn't it? In 1 Kings, God appears to him, says, "Ask what I shall give you."
And he asks for wisdom.
Right. Not long life or riches or victory, but an understanding heart to judge your people. God's pleased and grants him unprecedented wisdom, plus the wealth and honor he didn't ask for.
And that wisdom gets tested famously, doesn't it? The story of the two women and the baby.
The Judgment of Solomon. It's the classic example. Two prostitutes, one baby, both claiming it's theirs.
How does he solve it?
His solution is frankly shocking. He says, cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other.
Wow.
But it works. The real mother cries out, "Oh, my lord, give her the living child and by no means kill him." The other says, "It shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide it."
And Solomon knows immediately.
Instantly. He gives the baby to the first woman. It shows his deep insight into human nature.
Brilliant. And this wisdom extends to writing, too, traditionally.
That's the tradition. He's credited with Proverbs, collections of wise sayings, Ecclesiastes, a very philosophical book.
And the Song of Songs.
And the Song of Songs, yes, beautiful love poetry. Also, the Book of Wisdom, which is deuterocanonical.
Meaning it's in some Bibles, but not others.
Right. In the Catholic and Orthodox canons, not the Protestant or Jewish ones, tradition attributes it to him, though scholars think it's much later.
Okay, so a king famed for justice and literature. Let's circle back to the wealth. The Bible really plays this up.
It does. His 40-year reign is depicted as Israel's absolute peak of glory and riches.
Is there a figure mentioned?
1 Kings mentions an annual income of 666 talents of gold, just in tribute, which is a lot.
666 talents, that's specific.
It is. And he's shown living like a grand Eastern monarch, alliances, trade, particularly that key alliance with Hiram of Tyre fueling it all.
Huge wealth. But his biggest legacy, arguably, is construction. The temple.
The first temple, yes. David had gathered materials, but Solomon actually built it.
With help from Tyre again.
Yes, King Hiram sent skilled craftsmen, including an architect, also named Hiram, and resources like cedar wood from Lebanon. It was meant to be a permanent house for Yahweh and the Ark of the Covenant.
But it wasn't just the temple he built in Jerusalem, right?
No, the Bible lists quite a complex. After the temple, he built his own royal palace. It took even longer, apparently.
What did that include?
Several named buildings. The House of the Force of Lebanon, the Hall of Pillars, the Hall of the Throne, which was also for judgment.
His own house, and one for Pharaoh's daughter. He married an Egyptian princess.
Yes, a significant political alliance. And she got her own residence within the palace complex.
And the throne itself sounds amazing, moving parts.
The descriptions are incredible. Ivory overlaid with gold, lions on the steps, possibly mechanical features. Nothing like it, the text says.
Sounds almost mythical.
It does. He's also credited with waterworks for the city and building up the Millo, probably fortifications or landfill structure.
But what about archaeology? Does it back this up? This massive building program in Jerusalem?
That's where it gets difficult. Honestly, direct archaeological evidence for grand Solomonic structures in Jerusalem from the 10th century BCE is lacking. The Temple Mount itself is largely unexcavated for religious and political reasons.
Okay. A critical point. We'll definitely come back to the historicity debate. Did he build elsewhere too?
The Bible says so. Rebuilding cities like Hazor, Megiddo, Gezer, building the port of Ezion-Geber on the Red Sea, even Palmyra, way out in the Syrian desert, as a trade outpost.
Is there evidence for those?
Well, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer have impressive remains, gates, palaces. For a long time, they were considered Solomonic.
But not anymore.
The dominant view now, pushed by archaeologists like Finkelstein, dates those large structures later to the Omride dynasty in the 9th century. The dating is heavily debated. Ezion-Geber's exact location isn't certain, but the overall biblical picture is one of booming trade, land, and sea.
Okay, so a huge building reputation. But the physical proof and dating are complex. Now, another famous aspect, wives and concubines. The numbers are wild.
They really are. From King says 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines.
1,000 women. Seriously.
That's a number given. They're described as foreign women, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittites, and, as we mentioned, the Egyptian princess.
Why so many alliances?
Alliances were definitely part of it, like the marriage to Pharaoh's daughter. But the text also says Solomon clung to these in love. Only one is named as the mother of his heir, Naamah the Ammonite, mother of Rehoboam.
And these foreign wives become a problem in the narrative, don't they?
A huge problem. The biblical account says that, as Solomon aged, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, Ashtoreth, Milcom, Chemosh.
And he built shrines for them.
He did, high places, altars. And this, according to the text, is what provoked God's anger.
But how do critical scholars view this? Is it history or theology?
Many critical scholars, especially those looking at it through the lens of higher criticism or Deuteronomistic history.
The idea that books like Kings were edited later with a specific theological agenda.
Exactly. They often see this story as a way to explain why the kingdom eventually split. It projects the cause of the later division back onto Solomon's religious failings, specifically his tolerance of foreign cults. A theological explanation constructed after the fact.
Got it. So maybe less about Solomon's personal practice, more about explaining later history. Okay, another famous visitor. The Queen of Sheba. Brief story in the Bible, but huge impact later.
Very brief, yeah. She hears of Solomon's wisdom and fame, comes to Jerusalem with a massive caravan, camels bearing spices, gold, precious stones.
To test him.
To test him with hard questions, yes. He answers everything. She's overwhelmed by his wisdom, his palace, the food, his servants, the temple offerings.
Yeah, that.
They exchange lavish gifts. Solomon gives her all her desire, and she goes home. That's basically it in the Bible. Very little detail on the why or the political significance.
But legends filled in the gaps, right? Where even was Sheba?
Good question. Usually identified with Saba, a kingdom in southern Arabia, modern Yemen. Some traditions link it to Ethiopia or Eritrea.
And the legends get pretty elaborate.
Oh, yeah. Rabbinic tradition adds details, like Solomon summoning her via a hoopoe bird. The Ethiopian tradition in the Kabr Nagast is the most famous.
That's the one with the affair.
Yes. It claims Solomon and the queen had a son, Menelik I. He's considered the founder of the Ethiopian imperial dynasty.
And didn't they claim he took the Ark of the Covenant?
That's the claim, that Menelik took the ark back to Ethiopia, where it supposedly still resides in Axum, guarded in a church, unseen. It's a hugely important story for Ethiopian identity and the monarchy's legitimacy.
Wow. Though not everyone bought that version.
No, some rabbis, maybe being critical of Solomon, claimed the child was actually an ancestor of Nebuchadnezzar, the guy who destroyed Solomon's temple.
Talk about irony. Okay, so despite the wisdom, the wealth, the Bible says Solomon sinned. How did that unfold?
Well, Jewish tradition points to his execution of Shimei ben Gera, supposedly his teacher who warned him about foreign wives, as his first misstep.
But the main issue in Kings is the idolatry.
Yes, 1 Kings explicitly states his foreign wives turned his heart to other gods. This leads to divine anger and the prophecy that the kingdom will be torn from his family.
Does it connect this to specific laws?
It does. It frames his actions as violating the laws for kings in Deuteronomy 17. Don't multiply horses, don't multiply wives, lest they turn your heart away, don't multiply silver and gold excessively.
When he did all three.
According to Kings, yes. The 666 talents of gold, the horses and chariots imported from Egypt, and obviously the wives.
So the punishment was the kingdom dividing.
Yes, but God says for David's sake, it won't happen in Solomon's lifetime, but under his son. And even then, one tribe, Judah, will remain loyal to David's line.
A delayed punishment. Did he also face human enemies towards the end?
He did. The text mentions adversaries rising up. Hadad the Edomite, risen in Syria.
And someone from within Israel.
Yes, Jeroboam, an Ephraimite official who Solomon had put in charge of forced labor. He rebels and later becomes the first king of the northern kingdom.
So internal and external troubles.
Yeah.
Then comes his death.
Right. The Bible says he reigned for 40 years, died naturally around age 55. His son Rehoboam takes over.
But the transition isn't smooth.
Not at all. Rehoboam acts harshly, rejects advice to lighten the tax burden.
And the northern tribes revolt.
10 tribes break away, choose Jeroboam as their king, forming the northern kingdom of Israel. Rehoboam is left with Judah in the south.
And the kingdom is divided permanently.
Permanently, never reunited. Yet, despite this end, Solomon's reign is still remembered as this golden age, and he himself as this legendary wise king.
And the traditional author of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs. Maybe some Psalms too.
Possibly Psalm 72 and 127 are sometimes linked to him.
A really complex legacy. Now, besides the main biblical books, you mentioned apocryphal or deuterocanonical texts. What do they add?
They often enhance his reputation for wisdom and, interestingly, other kinds of knowledge. The Book of Wisdom portrays him as an astronomer.
Written much later, though.
Yes, likely Hellenistic period. Then you have things like the Odes of Solomon, Psalms of Solomon, more wisdom poetry attributed to him, probably pseudepigraphical.
Meaning falsely attributed?
Right, written later but using his name for authority. There's even mention by an ancient historian, Eupolemus, of supposed letters between Solomon and other kings.
Expanding his diplomatic legend. And what about the supernatural connection? Demons.
That becomes a major theme in later texts. A Gnostic text, the Apocalypse of Adam, might be the earliest mention Solomon sending demons to find a runaway virgin.
Wow. Okay.
But the big one is the Testament of Solomon. It's this whole elaborate text detailing how he controlled demons, learned their secrets, and used them to build the temple. Pure legend, but influential.
Master of demons. That leads us right into the historicity question. What's the scholarly consensus, if there is one?
Consensus is tricky here. Most scholars probably accept that a ruler named Solomon existed in Jerusalem around the 10th century BCE.
Right.
But the biblical picture of this huge, wealthy, unified empire, that's where the skepticism comes in. Many see that as a later exaggeration, maybe projecting the power of later kingdoms back onto him.
Okay, so what are the main arguments against the big biblical picture?
Well, first, the lack of direct, unambiguous evidence outside the Bible for such a grand kingdom at that specific time. Some call it an archaeological dark age in Judah.
No inscriptions, no palaces, clearly dated to him.
Not really in Jerusalem itself. Josephus mentions Tyrian records about Hiram helping with the temple, but we don't have those records directly. And those big structures at Hazor, Megiddo, Bezer.
The dating issue again. Finkelstein and others place them later. Omride period.
Exactly. They also argue Jerusalem was just too small then to be the capital of a vast empire collecting massive tribute. The population wouldn't support it.
What else?
They point out that the first clear, non-biblical mentions of Israel and Judah as kingdoms come later, their theory is that the Omrides in the north were actually the big regional power, and later Judean writers downplayed them and magnified a supposed Solomonic golden age.
Some go even further, right? The minimalists.
Yes, some minimalists argue Jerusalem wasn't a significant city at all until maybe the 7th century BCE, much later than Solomon.
That's a pretty strong critique. What about arguments for the biblical view, or at least parts of it?
There are defenders. André Lemaire thinks the core biblical tradition is generally trustworthy. He cites finds like cinnamon from Southeast Asia in 10th century contexts, suggesting maybe long-distance trade was possible.
A sense of connection.
Hints. Kenneth Kitchen argues for a mini-empire, wealthier than a city-state, and thinks the 666 talents of gold isn't an outrageous sum compared to other ancient rulers.
What about the temple description?
Kitchen and William Dever argue the description fits what we know of temples in that region and era. Dever says we have archaeological parallels for basically every feature described.
So, plausible architecture, even if we haven't found the temple.
Right. Plausible for the time.
Is there a middle ground where most scholars land?
I think many do. They might say, okay, the Bible exaggerates the wealth, the size, the buildings.
But Solomon was real.
Probably. A real ruler in Jerusalem, maybe controlling a region larger than just the city, undertook some building, maybe a temple or palace on a smaller scale than the Bible describes.
So acknowledging a historical core, but questioning the scale.
Exactly. Abraham Faust's work suggests significant settlement and commerce nearby, implying some kind of organized political center in Jerusalem. Lester Grabbe thinks there was a ruler, a small Jerusalem, maybe a temple. Dever, too. Solomon ruled, built a temple, but the descriptions got inflated later.
Okay, a more nuanced view. What does archaeology generally show for that period, the 10th century, in the region?
Generally, it looks like a continuation of earlier Canaanite culture. There isn't a sudden break indicating a massive new empire or cultural explosion.
No Solomonic pottery style, for instance.
Not really. In fact, Philistine pottery from the coast often looks more sophisticated than finds from the Judean hills usually assigned to Israel. But, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially given later destructions.
True. And the Temple Mount itself remains largely off-limits to archaeologists.
Precisely. Due to the sensitivities, the major questions about Solomon's Jerusalem constructions remain archaeologically unanswered for now.
What about those precious metals from Tarshish? Any archaeological link there?
Actually, yes, that's interesting. Biblical passages link Tarshish, Hiram, and Solomon with wealth, especially silver. And in 2013, silver hoards were found in Phoenicia, dating to around that period.
Really?
Yeah. It suggests that region was wealthy in silver then, potentially supporting the idea of trade networks, maybe involving Tarshish, bringing in metals. It aligns with that part of the narrative.
Okay, tangible evidence lining up there. What about Kabul? That weird story of Solomon selling territory Hiram didn't like.
Yeah, Hiram calls it Kabul, good for nothing, looking at the distribution of fortified towns in Iron Age style. Well, Kyle Keimer suggests maybe Solomon offloaded less valuable border territory, maybe for strategic reasons, or maybe showing he had the upper hand politically over Hiram.
And the fact that this slightly unflattering story survived.
Suggests the Deuteronomistic historian using the source was being somewhat faithful to it, perhaps.
Interesting. Last point on criticism.
Yeah.
His religion. Building a temple for Yahweh, but also shrines for other gods. How do critics reconcile that?
It's a tension, right. From a critical view, it complicates the idea of him being purely devoted to Yahweh from the start. Some argue passages showing deep devotion, like the temple dedication prayer,
Were written later.
likely written or heavily edited later, maybe after Jerusalem was firmly established as the only legitimate place of worship, to bolster that claim. The Deuteronomist's hand is often seen here.
Okay. So, history, archaeology, criticism, it's a tangled web. Let's shift to how different religions see him today, starting with Judaism.
In Judaism, he's revered but also seen as flawed. He sinned with the foreign wives, the horses, the gold, maybe thinking his wisdom made him immune to the law's intent.
Is there a specific tradition about the wives?
There's a midrash saying when he married Pharaoh's daughter, a sandbank formed, which grew and eventually became the site of Rome, the power that destroyed the Second Temple. A symbolic link.
Wow. But overall, is he seen positively?
Generally, yes. Praised as a righteous king, builder of the temple. Though some interpretations, like Einstein Saltz's, see his tolerance of idolatry as maybe cynical realpolitik, setting a bad example even if he didn't believe it himself.
And he's linked to the Ark later.
Tradition holds King Josiah hid the ark and other items in a secret chamber Solomon had prepared within the temple, anticipating future threats. Also, interestingly, some rabbinic chronology puts his reign much later, 9th century BCE.
Okay, a complex figure in Jewish thought. What about Christianity?
Christianity traditionally accepts his historicity, though modern Christian scholars also debate his authorship of books like Ecclesiastes.
Does he appear in the New Testament?
Yes. Matthew includes him in Jesus' genealogy. Luke's genealogy is different, leading to theological discussions. Jesus himself mentions Solomon's glory. Even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these lilies when teaching about not worrying.
So, a symbol of earthly splendor.
Right. And in the Eastern Orthodox Church, he's actually venerated as a saint, a righteous prophet and king. Historically, rulers like Philip II of Spain consciously tried to model themselves on him.
And typologically.
He's often seen as a type, a foreshadowing of Christ, his wisdom, his peaceful reign, Solomon meaning peaceful, his building of God's house.
Okay. And Islam. How is he viewed there?
In Islam, Solomon Suleiman ibn Dawood is a major figure. He's considered a prophet, a messenger of God, and a divinely appointed king.
Not just a king, but a prophet too.
Yes, inheriting prophethood and kingship from his father, Dawood. Crucially, Islamic tradition insists he never committed idolatry. His piety is emphasized.
What powers does the Quran attribute to him?
Incredible powers, great wisdom and knowledge, obviously, but also understanding the language of birds, controlling the wind, commanding jinn, spirits.
Jinn, like genies.
Sort of. Supernatural beings, he could command them. There's even a story of a jinn briefly impersonating him. These stories are often read allegorically, too. In Persia, his image merged somewhat with the mythical King Jamshid.
So, a powerful, righteous prophet king in Islam. What about the Baha'i faith?
The Baha'i faith sees Solomon as one of the lesser prophets. Still a messenger of God, important for his time, part of the lineage leading up to later figures.
Where is he mentioned?
Baha'u'llah mentions him in works like the Hidden Words and the Tablet of Wisdom. Interestingly, he's depicted there as a contemporary of Pythagoras.
Pythagoras. Wow. Okay, so respected across the Abrahamic spectrum. Now, let's dive into the legends. They get pretty wild, right? He pops up in the 1001 Nights.
He does. Most famously, there's the story of the fisherman who finds a brass bottle sealed with Solomon's seal. Inside is a powerful genie Solomon imprisoned centuries earlier.
A testament to his power.
Absolutely. Other tales have travelers finding inscriptions or structures left by Solomon in remote places, offering help or wisdom.
And this theme of magic, controlling spirits, angels, it's huge in the legends.
It really ticks off. Rabbinic legends say because he asked only for wisdom, God gave him dominion over everything. Angels, demons, animals. They all served him, brought him treasures.
And the Seal of Solomon.
That signet ring becomes legendary in medieval Jewish, Islamic, and Western occult traditions, often shown as a pentagram or hexagram, the Star of David precursor. It gave him command over spirits, communication with animals, a powerful magical amulet.
And legends about him battling demons. Asmodeus.
Yes, the story of Asmodeus, king of demons, tricking Solomon, stealing his ring, taking his throne. Solomon wanders as a beggar until he gets the ring back, often from a fish. It's a classic fall and restoration tale.
Sounds like a cautionary tale, too.
Definitely. There are other magical items, too. Solomon's Key, the title of a famous grimoire on demon summoning. Solomon's Table, supposedly taken to Spain. The Book of Deadly Names mentions him commanding 72 jinn.
A whole magical toolkit. Did angels help build the temple in these legends?
Yes, some legends say angels helped, stones moving miraculously. And then there's the shamir.
The what?
The shamir, a mythical worm the size of a barley corn that could cut through stone. Solomon supposedly used it to perfectly shape the temple stones without iron tools.
How did he get it?
Legends say his eagle fetched it after Asmodeus revealed its location, guarded by a mountain rooster. It's all very fantastical.
Fantastical indeed. What about Kabbalah?
Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, depicts him flying on a celestial throne carried by an eagle, confronting fallen angels like Uzzah and Azazel, forcing them to reveal secrets with his ring. Cosmic stuff.
And the palace with no entrance?
Another legend. He finds this incredible palace, can't find a way in, summons demons, then eagles of increasing age. The oldest eagle reveals the entrance is buried under sand. Inside, an idol warns of mortality, even for great kings like Shaddad, son of Ad.
A memento mori. And the throne descriptions. Does it sound insane?
They are. Targum Sheni and other midrashim describe this incredibly elaborate throne. Gold, jewels, 12 golden lions, 12 golden eagles on the steps.
Mechanical animals?
Apparently. Animals moving as he climbed, eagles forming a canopy, a dove placing the Torah scroll on his lap. It supposedly could detect false witnesses. Legends say it was taken by Shishak, passed through Sennacherib, Nebuchadnezzar. Others tried to sit on it but couldn't figure out the mechanisms or were harmed, until Darius the Persian.
A throne with a mind of its own. Okay, shifting slightly, Freemasonry. Solomon's relevant there too.
Very much so. Masonic rituals and symbolism are full of references to King Solomon and the building of his temple. Masonic lodges are often called temples, symbolically representing Solomon's.
An enduring symbolic connection. And geographically, the Solomon Islands.
Named by the Spanish explorer Mendaña in 1568. He heard indigenous stories of gold and thought he'd found the source of Solomon's legendary wealth, a fear, perhaps. So he named them the Solomon Islands.
Hoping for gold. Finally, his impact on culture, literature, art, music, it's huge.
Absolutely massive and ongoing. You've got adventure stories like H. Rider Haggard's King Solomon's Mines. He appears in Dante's Paradiso. O. Henry uses him as a benchmark for wealth in The Gift of the Magi. Neil Stephenson weaves him into the Baroque cycle.
Or films, too.
Big Hollywood epics like Solomon and Sheba. More recent films, too, like an Iranian one, The Kingdom of Solomon.
Yes.
Andal wrote a whole oratorio, Solomon. Kate Bush has her Song of Solomon. Even the Grateful Dead have an instrumental called King Solomon's Marbles. He just keeps popping up.
He really does. Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've covered Solomon in the Bible, wise king, wealthy king, temple builder.
Right, but also the king whose actions in the biblical narrative led to division.
We've looked at the huge scholarly debate about historicity,
Right.
how much is real, how much is legend or later projection.
The likely historical core versus the grand biblical portrayal, a debate that's still very active.
And we've seen his enduring importance in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the Baha'i faith, each with unique perspectives.
And the incredible folklore and legends, master of demons, magical artifacts, that amazing throne.
He's just this incredibly complex, endlessly fascinating figure, isn't he? Constantly being reinterpreted.
Absolutely. Across centuries and cultures.
So, for you listening, after hearing all this, the history, the faith, the legends, maybe think about this. What single part of Solomon's incredibly varied story strikes you the most? What does it reveal about what we as humans value or desire, whether it's wisdom, power, faith, or leaving a lasting legacy?
That's a great question to ponder.
Something to think about until our next deep dive.
Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're really getting into the fascinating world of bone.
Yeah, it's a topic that seems simple on the surface, but it's incredibly complex.
Exactly. You've pulled together some amazing material for us, anatomy, biology, health, the whole picture.
Right.
And the plan is to go way beyond just, the idea of a skeleton. We want to understand what bones really are, how they work, and why they matter so much.
Absolutely. And I think the first surprise for many is that bone isn't just like inert scaffolding, it's alive.
Alive and dynamic.
Totally. It's bustling with cellular activity. The design inside and out is intricate, and the jobs it performs, well, they go far beyond just holding us upright.
Okay, let's kick things off there. What is bone, fundamentally, beyond just the hard stuff?
Well, technically, it's a rigid organ, part of the vertebrate endoskeleton, but that's a very dry definition.
Doesn't quite capture the excitement, does it?
Not at all. Think about it. Bones protect vital organs, like your skull protecting your brain. They're the factory for our blood cells, red and white. They store crucial minerals, provide the structure that gives us our shape, and they're essential for letting us move.
Right. The whole lever system with muscles.
Precisely. And a bonus one, those tiny bones in the ear, essential for hearing.
Wow. Okay. That's a much bigger portfolio than I think most people realize. So it's not just one uniform material then, this bone tissue idea.
Exactly. Osseous tissue. It's a specialized connective tissue, and its internal structure is amazing, almost like a honeycomb.
A honeycomb for strength.
Yep, gives it rigidity, but keeps it relatively light. And this tissue is constantly being built, maintained, and remodeled by different types of cells.
Okay, let's meet the crew. Who are the main players in this bone building operation?
First up, you have the osteoblasts. Think of them as the builders.
The construction team.
Exactly. They form new bone and mineralize it. They secrete something called osteoid, that's like the collagen framework, and then they manage the calcium phosphate deposition.
So they lay the foundation and then make it hard?
You got it. And here's a neat trick. Once an osteoblast gets surrounded by the bone matrix it just built, it changes. It becomes an osteocyte.
So the builder becomes a resident. What do they do then, these osteocytes?
They live in little pockets called lacunae, and they're not isolated. They have these tiny channels, canaliculi, connecting them. They chat with each other, sense mechanical stress, and help direct remodeling.
Okay, builders and residents. Who else?
Then you have the osteoclasts. They're the demolition and recycling crew.
Ah, breaking things down.
Right. They resorb or break down bone tissue. These are large cells, interestingly derived from immune cell precursors, not the same line as osteoblasts. They sit in little pits called Hauschip's lacunae.
And why is breaking down bone important?
It's crucial for remodeling, repairing damage, reshaping bone, and also for releasing calcium into the bloodstream when the body needs it. Calcium homeostasis.
Builders, residents, demolition, anyone else.
Yeah, they're bone lining cells. They're basically flattened, inactive osteoblasts that cover the bone surface, kind of protecting it. And deep inside, in the marrow, you have the hematopoietic stem cells. These are the powerhouses that produce all our blood cells: red cells, white cells, platelets.
Which links back to that blood production function you mentioned. It's all happening in there.
It really is.
So what's bone actually made of, chemically speaking? You mentioned collagen and minerals.
It's a composite material. About 30% is organic matrix, mostly type I collagen that gives it tensile strength, flexibility, stops it being brittle.
Like the rebar in concrete.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And there's ground substance too, other proteins and molecules. Then about 70% is the inorganic mineral part.
That's the hard stuff.
That's the hard stuff. Mostly hydroxyapatite, which is a form of calcium phosphate that gives it its compressive strength, its resistance to squeezing, plus some other trace mineral.
Collagen for flex, minerals for hardness. Makes sense. And you mentioned woven and lamellar bone.
Right. That's about how the collagen is arranged. Woven bone has collagen fibers all jumbled up. A bit messy, yeah.
Okay.
It forms quickly, like in a fetus or when a fracture first starts healing, but it's mechanically weaker.
Okay.
Lamellar bone is much more organized. The collagen is laid down in parallel sheets called lamellae. It's stronger, forms slower.
And that's what most adult bone is.
Yes. In compact bone, these lamellae often form concentric rings around blood vessels, making structures called osteons. Super strong, especially against twisting forces. Woven bone usually gets replaced by lamellar bone over time.
And how does the mineralization actually happen? How does the hard stuff get laid down?
So the osteoblasts secrete the osteoid first, the collagen framework, then calcium and phosphate ions from your body fluids start to precipitate and crystallize onto this framework.
It just happens.
Well, it's tightly controlled. An enzyme called alkaline phosphatase released by osteoblasts is really important. It helps create the right chemical conditions, making sure there's enough phosphate available for the minerals to form properly and harden the matrix.
Okay, got the building blocks, the hardening. What about the big picture, the overall structure of a whole bone? We talk about compact and spongy bone.
Right, those are the two main types you see macroscopically. Cortical bone or compact bone is the dense, hard outer layer.
The shell.
Pretty much. Makes up about 80% of your skeleton's mass. It provides strength, protection, attachment points for muscles. It's the main load bearer. Microscopically, it's made of those osteons we talked about, with canals for blood vessels and nerves. It's covered by the periosteum outside and the endosteum inside.
And inside that shell is the cancellous bone, the spongy stuff.
Exactly. Cancellous or spongy or trabecular bone, lots of names. It's a network of bony struts, the trabeculae, with spaces in between.
Like a lattice?
Yeah, a 3D lattice. It's less dense than cortical bone, more flexible, and has a huge surface area. That surface area is key for metabolic activity, especially swapping calcium with the blood.
Ah, okay.
You find it mainly at the ends of long bones, inside vertebrae, flat bones. And those spaces are often filled with bone marrow.
Right, the marrow and the trabeculae themselves, are they just random?
No, not at all. That's the clever bit. They actually align themselves along the lines of stress the bone usually experiences. So it's structurally optimized. It provides strength exactly where it's needed without unnecessary weight.
That's smart design, nature's engineering.
It really is.
And the marrow inside, red versus yellow.
So red marrow is where hematopoiesis happens, blood cell production. In babies and young children, most marrow is red.
Busy building blood cells.
Exactly. As we get older, a lot of that red marrow gets gradually replaced by yellow marrow, which is mostly fat, marrow adipose tissue, or MAT.
So energy storage?
Primarily, yes.
Yeah.
In adults, red marrow is mainly found in flat bones like the ribs, sternum, vertebrae, pelvis, and the ends of the femur and humerus.
Interesting shift in function over time. And you mentioned blood supply. Bones need blood, too.
Oh, definitely. They're quite vascular. They get about 10% of your heart's output. Blood vessels enter through the cortex, branch out through the marrow and inner surfaces, and then exit. Interestingly, the oxygen level in the marrow is quite low compared to arterial blood.
Okay, internal structure, check. What about the different shapes of bones? Long, short, what else?
Yeah, we classify them mainly by shape. There are 5 main types. Long bones are the obvious ones.
Like in your arms and legs.
Exactly. Longer than they are wide, with a shaft, diaphysis, and ends, epiphysis. Mostly compact bone in the shaft, spongy bone at the ends, marrow in the middle, limbs, fingers, toes, clavicle. Those are long bones.
Okay, short bones.
Think cube-shaped, like the bones in your wrist, carpals, and ankle fossils. They have a thin, compact layer over spongy bone. Good for stability, some movement.
Flat bones. Skull plates.
Yep, skull bones, sternum, ribs, scapulae. Thin, often curved. Usually 2 layers of compact bone sandwiching spongy bone like an Oreo cookie.
Huh. Okay. Sesamoid bones. That sounds different.
Yeah, these are interesting. They're bones embedded within tendons.
Like the kneecap.
Exactly. The patella is the biggest example. They act like pulleys, changing the angle of the tendon and giving the muscle more leverage. There's one in the wrist, too, the pisiform.
Clever. And the last category.
Irregular bones.
Mm-hmm.
Basically the ones that don't fit neatly anywhere else. Complex shapes.
Like vertebrae.
Perfect example. Vertebrae, pelvic bones, some facial and skull bones like the ethmoid or sphenoid. Thin, compact layers over a spongy interior. Their weird shapes usually relate to their specific, complex functions.
Okay, that covers the variety. Now, how do these things even form? Bone development? Ossification?
Right, osteogenesis.
Yeah.
2 main ways it happens, starting before we're even born. Intramembranous ossification and endochondral ossification.
Big words. What's the difference?
Intramembranous is more direct. Bone forms straight from embryonic connective tissue called mesenchyme.
Like magic.
Sort of. Mesenchymal cells cluster, turn into osteoblasts, start laying down bone. It's how most flat bones of the skull, the jaw bones, and the clavicles form.
Okay, direct from tissue to bone.
And endochondral. Endochondral means within cartilage. This is how most bones form, especially long bones. You start with a cartilage model, like a template of the future bone.
A cartilage skeleton first.
Pretty much. Then bone starts replacing the cartilage. First in the shaft, the primary ossification center. Later, at the ends, the secondary ossification centers.
And the growth plates fit in here.
Exactly. Between the shaft, diaphysis, and the ends, epiphysis, of growing long bones, you have the epiphyseal plates. There are zones of cartilage that keep growing, pushing the ends further apart, allowing the bone to lengthen.
So that's how kids grow taller.
That's the main mechanism for long bone growth, yes. This process continues until late teens or early 20s, when the plates close, the cartilage stops growing and gets completely replaced by bone. Growth stops.
And how does the cartilage actually turn into bone in those plates?
It's a really organized process, happens in zones. You have resting cartilage, then cartilage cells dividing rapidly, then they swell up, then the matrix around them calcifies temporarily, and finally osteoblasts come in, lay down proper bone, while osteoclasts clean up the calcified cartilage remnants.
Wow, like an assembly line.
A very precise biological assembly line.
You mentioned earlier that youth is really key for bone health. Why is that period so critical?
Absolutely vital. Childhood and adolescence are when you build your bone bank account. Physical activity, especially weight-bearing stuff, running, jumping, sports, resistance training, really stimulates those osteoblasts.
Makes them build stronger bones.
Exactly. It increases bone density, improves the internal architecture, makes the whole structure stronger. This period is when you lay down your peak bone mass, the maximum amount of bone you'll ever have, usually reached in your 20s.
So you want that peak to be as high as possible.
Precisely. Because after that, bone density naturally starts to decline slowly with age. If you start with a higher peak, you've got more in reserve. It significantly lowers your risk of osteoporosis and fractures later in life. It's a crucial investment.
Makes sense. Build it strong when you can. Okay, we've covered structure, development. Let's circle back to functions. Beyond the obvious mechanical stuff, what else are bones up to?
Right, beyond protection and structure. Mechanically, they act as levers for muscles, like we said. Biomechanics studies all that. And don't forget hearing via the ossicles. Material-wise, they're strong under compression, less so under tension or twisting, with collagen providing that toughness.
Okay. And the non-mechanical jobs, synthetic ones.
Big one is hematopoiesis in the red marrow, making all those blood cells from stem cells. The marrow also helps break down old red blood cells.
Factory and recycling center. What about metabolic roles? You hinted at these.
Oh yeah, huge metabolic roles. They're the body's main storage depot for calcium and phosphorus.
The mineral bank.
Exactly. They also store growth factors within the matrix. And that yellow marrow, the MASH, stores fatty acids for energy.
Okay.
Bones also help regulate the body's acid-base balance by absorbing or releasing alkaline salts to buffer the blood, and they can store heavy metals, acting as a sort of detoxification reservoir, releasing them slowly later.
Storing heavy metals, that's unexpected.
It is. But maybe the most exciting recent discoveries involve bone as an endocrine organ.
Releasing hormones.
Yes. Osteoblasts will release fibroblast growth factor 23, or FGF23, which helps regulate phosphate levels via the kidneys. They also release osteocalcin.
Osteocalcin, what does that do?
It influences blood sugar and fat deposition. It seems to increase insulin secretion and sensitivity. It links skeletal health to overall metabolism.
Wow. So bones are talking to other organs, metabolically speaking.
They really are. And then, of course, the central role in calcium balance. Osteoclasts release calcium, osteoblasts lock it up. It's a dynamic equilibrium.
It's way more involved than just being scaffolding. This leads right into calcium and bone health. We know it's important for preventing osteoporosis.
Absolutely fundamental. You build up bone mass until around age 30, then it's a slow decline. Getting enough calcium, especially during youth, builds that higher peak bone mass we talked about. It's directly linked to better bone mineral density, or BMD.
And higher peak mass means less risk later.
Definitely. Studies clearly show low childhood BMD is linked to problems later. And increasing calcium intake, diet or supplements, boosts BMD in kids, especially around puberty. Consistent intake matters long-term.
So load up the kids with calcium.
Well, adequate intake is key. The recommendation for ages 9-18 is about 1,300 milligrams a day. But it's not always more is better. Some studies hint that extremely high intakes in some groups might not help, or could even be detrimental, maybe due to genetics or baseline diet factors.
Okay, so there's a balance.
Yes. It's about consistent, adequate intake, hitting that target combined with weight-bearing exercise. That combination during youth is the magic formula for building resilience against osteoporosis and growth issues. That period is just critical.
Makes sense. Consistency and activity. Now, bone remodeling, you've mentioned it. Why this constant rebuilding? Why not just build it once and be done?
Great question. This constant cycle of resorption by osteoclasts and formation by osteoblasts remodels about 10% of your adult skeleton each year.
10% a year?
Yeah. It's essential for several reasons.
Right.
1, calcium homeostasis, releasing or storing calcium as needed. 2, repairing microdamage. Everyday life causes tiny cracks and stresses. Remodeling fixes them before they become big problems.
Preventative maintenance.
Exactly. 3, it allows bones to adapt. Wolff's Law states that bone adapts to the loads placed on it. Areas under high stress get stronger. Exercise literally tells your bones to bulk up where needed.
How does the bone know where the stress is?
It's thought that mechanical stress creates tiny electrical fields in the bone piezoelectricity, which might signal the cells. It's an active adaptation.
So bones are constantly listening to how we use them.
Pretty much. And this whole process is tightly regulated by hormones, calcitonin, parathyroid hormone, growth hormone, sex hormones, and local signals between the bone cells themselves, like LNK ligand and osteoprotogerin. It's a complex dance.
An intricate control system. What determines how much bone we actually have overall our bone volume?
It's the balance between formation and resorption rates. Locally, various growth factors stored in the bone matrix itself, like IGFs, TGF-beta, BMPs, can be released and stimulate nearby osteoblast precursors to build more bone. It allows for targeted strengthening.
Okay, that's a great overview of healthy bone, but things can go wrong. Let's touch on the clinical side. What kind of problems affect bone?
Oh, a whole range. Arthritis affecting the joints, fractures obviously, bone infections, osteomyelitis, osteoporosis, bone tumors. It's a long list. Different specialists handle these: rheumatologists, orthopedic surgeons, oncologists.
And how are these diagnosed usually?
It starts with history and exam, then imaging is key: x-rays, CT, MRI, bone scans. Blood tests can also check mineral levels or markers of bone turnover.
Fractures are probably the most common thing people think of.
Yeah, broken bones happen from trauma, repetitive stress, or underlying weakness like osteoporosis or a tumor making the bone fragile. Lots of different types, depending on how and where it breaks. Treatment is pain control, immobilization casts, splints, and sometimes surgery to pin or plate the pieces. Rehab is usually needed afterwards.
And tumors. Can cancer start in bone or spread there?
Both. Primary bone cancers are rare but do happen. More commonly, bone is a site where cancers from elsewhere metastasize spread to.
Like from where?
Common ones are breast, lung, prostate, kidney, thyroid cancers. These metastases can either destroy bone, adipic, or cause extra bone to form sclerotic. Plus, you have cancers of the bone marrow itself, like leukemia and myeloma, which wreck bone health too. Treatment depends heavily on the type and stage: surgery, radiation, chemo, targeted drugs, pain management.
Sobering. You also mentioned diabetes affects bones.
Yes, both type 1 and type 2 seem to hinder osteoblast activity. This can lead to lower BMD and bone mass, increasing risk for things like osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, and fractures. Research is looking into ways to counteract this, maybe targeting osteocalcin or AGEs, advanced glycation end products.
Okay. What are some other, maybe less common, painful bone conditions?
Well, there's osteomyelite bone infection, osteomalacia soft bones in adults due to severe vitamin D deficiency. The childhood version is rickets, osteogenesis imperfecta or brittle bone disease, a genetic disorder. Osteochondritis dissecans affects joint cartilage and bone. Ankylosing spondylitis is an inflammatory arthritis primarily hitting the spine, and skeletal fluorosis from too much fluoride.
Quite the list. And then there's osteoporosis itself. Seems like a huge issue, especially later in life.
It is a major public health problem. Reduced bone density leading to increased fracture risk. Postmenopausal women are at highest risk due to estrogen loss, but older men and others can get it too. Risk factors include age, hormones, smoking, certain meds. Often it's silent until a fracture happens.
That's the scary part.
Exactly. That's why DXA scans are used for screening. There's also growing evidence linking age-related osteoporosis to oxidative DNA damage in bone cells. Treatment involves lifestyle calcium, vitamin D, exercise, and medications like bisphosphonates to slow bone loss or build density.
It really hammers home the need for lifelong attention to bone health.
Absolutely. It's crucial for preventing fractures, maintaining mobility, just general quality of life. And again, that childhood-adolescent window for building peak bone mass is key lifestyle choices, then can impact your adult peak mass by 20–40%. Reaching a good peak in your 20s gives you that safety margin against later loss. A healthy lifestyle throughout life is the best defense.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, what's osteology?
Osteology is simply the study of bones and teeth. It's used a lot in anthropology, archaeology, forensics.
How so?
By studying skeletal remains, experts can learn about past populations' diet, health, age at death, injuries, diseases. Bones tell stories about the past.
Like a biological archive. Fascinating. What about bones in other animals? Are they basically the same?
The fundamentals are conserved, but there are cool adaptations. Bird bones are often hollow and light for flight.
Right.
Some animals have extra bones, like antlers or horns. Aquatic animals might have denser bones for buoyancy control, and some animals, especially herbivores, practice osteophagy eating bones, probably for minerals like phosphate. And sadly, many human bone diseases also affect other vertebrates.
Adaptations everywhere. And finally, bones in human culture. They seem to pop up in interesting ways.
Definitely. Prehistorically, they were vital for tools. They've been carved into art, used for buttons, made into glue and gelatin. Bone char was used for filtering sugar and as pigment.
Oracle bones in China.
Yes, for divination. We still have things like wishbones. And historically, some cultures practice things like cranial deformation or foot binding, directly shaping bones. It shows how intertwined bones are with our biology and our culture.
It's an incredible journey, from the microscopic cells to cultural practices. Just wrapping up, what are the key things to take away?
I think the biggest takeaway is that bones are so much more than just a static frame. They're living, dynamic tissues.
Right.
They have complex structures, multiple cell types working constantly, and perform vital jobs in protection, movement, blood production, mineral balance, even metabolism regulation.
And understanding that really highlights why looking after them is so important, especially early in life, to build that strong foundation.
Absolutely. Build that peak bone mass, it pays dividends later.
It really makes you think, given how dynamic bones are constantly remodeling, what other parts of us that seem static are actually buzzing with hidden activity?
That's a great question. What does that constant cellular turnover and adaptation across our bodies really mean for aging, for health, for how we respond to challenges? We're probably just scratching the surface.